Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday Independent Consulting Topic Chats. I'm Jessica Metcalf, guest hosting today for Matt, and we are so excited to have Naaima here to present on the book Emergent Strategy. I have always enjoyed when she has presented for us in the past, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to share with us. And with that, I think I'm just going to turn it right over to our presenter and looking forward to hearing what she has to share.
Thank you, Jessica. I am so excited to have everybody involved in this discussion this morning. Welcome, welcome. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. So today's IC topic chat topic is a book review of Emergent Strategy, which is a book published by Adrienne Maree Brown, who is a writer, activist, and facilitator. And I thought that this would be an interesting book to review because as we were talking a couple of weeks ago in another book review done by Jennifer Jewis on workshops that change lives, I began to think more and more about the applications of facilitation to the work of evaluation. And so a big thanks to Jennifer for inspiring me to really kind of explore that a little bit more and think about the implications of how we facilitate as evaluators and what that can bring to our work. So just by way of introduction, I'm going to step back. So my name is Naaima and my firm is called Create Good. I work on advancing anti-racism through equity-centered strategic planning and evaluation with the folks that I partner with. And typically these are collective impact initiatives as well as social good organizations more broadly in and around the nonprofit sector, and perhaps even the for-profit sector sometimes. So I will jump into Emergent Strategy. I will say that in the session, in the session led by Jennifer on leading life-changing workshops, we explored, again, like I mentioned, the facilitative aspects of our work, and as evaluators, particularly in the context of offering workshops. So today I'm taking the liberty of expanding this view a little bit. So going beyond workshops, thinking about how do we as evaluators pursue the art of meaning making? And how do we see our roles as bridges to interpreting data, which often when we're working with our clients, because they have stakeholders and they bring different perspectives in interpreting and analyzing data, this necessitates that we work with groups of people to build consensus about what's going on and what the project and the work and the data is pointing toward. This is also asking us to consider our roles as facilitators and inviting change. So, and asking us to consider our potential to use data to bring about what's next, right? And we all know that, data can help us make more effective decisions. We all know that there are many systems issues and structural issues that are existent within our times. So really kind of taking a step back and inviting us to consider our role as facilitators of social change as well. And then lastly, thinking about how we examine our own biases as facilitators and creating spaces where our clients and their stakeholders can build mutual spaces of accountability for social good results. So what I appreciate about Adrienne Maree Brown and, many of her works, she's published at least 5, 6, I can't remember exactly how many books, but she really models collectivism and pays homage to a lot of her mentors and peers in the field as her teachers. And I appreciate this because I think it truly is the wave of an equity-centered future, right? I mean, I think it speaks a lot to how do we leave the construct of individualism that has us disconnected from each other behind? How do we learn to see each other more as contributors and have, everybody have something equally valuable to contribute to this project of shared liberation. She often quotes her teachers, including Grace Lee Boggs, who's pictured here, who spent much of her life advocating for civil rights and labor rights, and became a notable figure in Detroit's Black Power movement. Jennifer shared a quote in last session about how, as teachers taking on a teaching role, we need to do the work of facilitation in a way that speaks to our personal connection to the work and makes us vulnerable. And to me, the way that Adrienne Maree Brown invites folks to think about facilitation is really tapping into that place of what's personal for us about our work. And this is also amenable to helping us become more self-aware and doing the internal work of anti-racism, embedding equity, and starting that journey, long, arduous personal journey as well. And lastly, I appreciate Adrienne Maree Brown's approach to this work because it asks us to connect the reason why the work is important to us to how we go about doing the work. And that's really a lot of what holding facilitative process and space for change is about. So Adrienne Maree Brown is also heavily influenced by Octavia Butler, who is a science fiction writer and Afrofuturist. And for those not familiar with the Afrofuturism genre, it's often described as an open-ended genre combining science fiction, fantasy, and history to imagine a liberated future through a Black lens. Very popular author. Butler has, authored many works that Adrienne Maree Brown interprets as, really kind of painting us into the future, right? And we'll revisit this idea in a minute in terms of what emergent strategy is about. So one of the things that I find interesting and unique about this book, and there's a lot here, right? I think today's session is really going to focus on I guess more of a sneak preview, I would call it, than a book review, right? There's just so much and such deep content in this book that I think it wouldn't do justice to say that this is a comprehensive treatment of the book at all. But what I did is really kind of went through and pulled out the threads that I thought were central to what Brown is trying to teach about emergence and the strategy of emergent facilitation and holding space. And again, one of the things that I find unique and interesting about this book is that her writing is really a work of personal reflection. And in this kind of age that we live in of hyper information, data, kind of coming at us from many different ways, I just appreciated that she wasn't trying to sell this as like a panacea or like a magic, solution to everything, or a scientifically tested, rigorous, RCT style kind of, conclusion about anything. She's really, her style is a lot more about inviting, is about observing, is about taking space, pulling back, reflecting. And I think that this helps us think about new patterns and new ways of practicing in our own practice, right? Many of us perhaps seldom see our work as connected to a deeper realm of spiritual truth, or, maybe we do more often than we think, but we just haven't really stopped to really pause and articulate our work in that way. So what is emergent strategy? Brown often quotes Nick Obolensky, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who is a global thought leader in the field of organizational and leadership and talent development. So he also authored a book called Complex Adaptive Leadership, Embracing Paradox and Uncertainty. And Brown outlines kind of the basic principles of emergent strategy, but she talks about it as a way in which complex systems interact and the patterns that arise out of those interactions, right? So multiplicity of relatively simple interactions and seeing how patterns arise from out of that. And so Brown argues that social change is inherently emergent and that movements must be adaptable and responsive to changing circumstances, right? So this is how she begins to craft that picture together, right? And tie together these threads of how do we understand our value and our contributions as facilitative agents and bringing about social change. So Adrienne Marie Brown's definition of emergent strategy: plans of action, personal practices, and collective organizing tools that account for constant change and rely on the strength of relationship for adaptation, with a crush on biomimicry and permaculture. So I really love her writing style. For those who have read her books, it's often really poetic. There's almost kind of a cadence to it. And I think that that is a really interesting and great, refreshing kind of break from a lot of what we're exposed to in evaluation, which tends to be a little bit more on the academic and drier side of things. So it's a great invitation, if you have kind of that multidisciplinary approach or style, to really think about what are the cross applications, right? Um, so here I just took a minute to define biomimicry and permaculture. So biomimetics is this idea of imitating models and systems within nature for the purpose of solving complex human problems, and permaculture being a system of agriculture and social design principles centered around stimulating or directly utilizing the patterns and features observed in natural ecosystems. So, one of the key things that I picked up as a central theme in how emergent strategy works is the emphasis on the importance of relationships. And this includes ideas of community building, as well as the fact that movements must be grounded in deep connections and a shared sense of purpose, right? When we think about social movements, when we think about movements that have been successful, these were highly networked concepts, right? Concepts that were highly networked within people who believed in these concepts and in these values and these ideas, and ultimately were able to create action for sea change, right? So Brown also highlights the role of creativity and imagination in social change, drawing upon examples of science fiction and visionary art to illustrate the power of speculative thinking. And here I put a pack of wolves because sometimes, even thinking about our narratives of individualism and the individualistic culture that we kind of swim in, we often hear about, the lone wolf, or this idea of like wolf being an individualistic predator, right? But when you think about community, wolves actually travel in packs, right? And so thinking about how do we really reimagine our own narratives around communalism and individualism. So, again, taking straight from the book, we talk here about Brown takes directly from Octavia Butler's works and her poems. And so she literally in the book has this like column of a poem from Octavia Butler and then these characteristics of emergent strategy. So she calls emergent strategy fractal, adaptive, nonlinear, and iterative, resilient, transformative justice, interdependent, decentralized, creating more possibilities. And then in holding change, she adds a few other pieces, which includes like scholarship, reflection, practice, and experiment, and also intention. So the idea of fractal being the relationship between the small and the large, which is a really big part, as we kind of talked about earlier, of how emergence occurs. Adaptive being this idea of how we change, nonlinear and iterative being the pace and the pathways of change. When she talks about resilience, she is referring to how we recover and transform. Interdependent and decentralized, I think Brown envisions, emergence as really being decentralized in terms of who we are and how we share. And creating more possibilities is what she calls how we move towards life. And the intention piece, I think, is really big as well, because for her, it's centered in how we want to do this work, right? Like how we approach the work, how we are centered in our own purpose and our own values in doing this work. So this is a little bit of me interpreting her work. And Brown highlights the role of visionary fiction and speculative thinking in shaping the future. So she argues that these tools can help us imagine and create new possibilities for social change. She draws upon examples of science fiction and visionary art, as I mentioned before, and she emphasizes the need for experimentation and improvisation, arguing that movements must be willing to take risks and try new approaches in order to be effective. And so, thinking about our role as evaluators, how do we help movements assess the risks, right? How do we help folks who are in the position to take data and make meaning of it really understand what the implications of that data are in trying something different, or how to use, if they are already doing something that's non-traditional or different, how do we use the data to create a proof point or a case for doing things differently, right? Or how do we use it to pursue continuous learning so that people are benefiting from the growth and the progress of a movement. Another quote that really resonated with me and really my own philosophy and approach is that fictive thinking helps us dream up, imagine, and start building upon what Brown calls the impossible, right? It helps us really live into the future, as it were, um, helps us create the possibilities that we're trying to see in the world. So I love this quote. She says, perhaps the most egregious thing we are taught is that we should just be really good at what's already possible, to leave the impossible alone. And, I think in our work as evaluators, oftentimes we are called upon to say, is a new way really actually possible? And how can we begin to assess, right, what that would look like and what that would imply for the work that lies ahead of us? And then Brown, importantly discusses the primacy of relationships to transformative justice and community accountability, arguing that movements must be grounded in a commitment to healing and transformation. So to me, this looks like creating spaces of mutual accountability, of partnership, thinking about how that shows up in our work. She also emphasizes the need for intersectionality and solidarity, arguing that movements must work to build bridges between different communities and struggles. So really kind of thinking about how does this call upon us all to look at the critical connections that we need to create and look at how we bridge across cultural understandings. She often quotes Margaret Wheatley, who she said, sees as another teacher, as another mentor. And, you can see some of the points that Wheatley expands upon here in terms of her book, Leadership in the New Science, was published back in '92. So again, just to kind of sum it up, I would say, principles of emergent strategy are really about having having the small be reflected in what's larger, right? Or like understanding how the small is a reflection of the larger patterns that we see around us. She also emphasizes this idea that change is constant, right? It's the only thing that's really driving us forward. So she has this great quote about how that's why she doesn't let, things that make her feel hopeless in the moment really drag her down, because she knows that change is this constant evolving force that helps us evolve, right? And then she also talks about how, and these are, again, kind of boiling down more to principles of facilitation. So she says there's always enough time for the right work. And I really pause at this because I think it's an invitation for all of us to consider how we think about time and the projects that we pursue. And driving at the essence of what the change is, or what the heart of the hypothesis and the question, the research question that our clients and the people that we partner with have. How do we really spend the time to be reflective, to help them sit with the data and really have that right understanding of it, right? So that's something that I kind of apply as I'm thinking about how I build this into my practice. And also that there is a conversation in the room that only these people in this moment can have. And she says, find it, right? So as a facilitator, how do we find the conversation that is begging to be had? So there's something about, going beyond the realm of what we can see and really kind of feeling the energy in the room that she talks about in her book, Holding Change, which is also a really phenomenal read, for those who are fans. But I think it's just an interesting way of kind of understanding how energy and momentum move among people. And then never a failure, always a lesson. I really like this reframe, right? I think we always kind of hear this, and it's important to really kind of lean into, particularly with, cross-cultural work and work around equity. This is the way we learn, right? Making the mistakes, feeling the feels, the discomfort, all of it. That is how we do the work of learning. And of course, she highlights that within her principles as well. So, and trusting the people, this is a really interesting concept for me. She says the more you trust, the more trustworthy they become. So thinking about how we hold space with our people, whether it's folks we collaborate with, whether it's folks that we, you know, um, are getting paid to work with, thinking about how do we approach the relationships that we build and moving at the speed of trust. And what I really love, and I'm inviting myself to, or challenging myself to lean more and more into, is this last idea of less prep and more presence. So, thinking about when I am facilitating a project or facilitating meeting making with data for a group of people, how do I really come into that space in full presence without worrying about what activity I've prepped, or if the prompt is gonna be followed, or if everything is gonna happen in time, right? Like, what are the things that I can help shift within my mindsets to really focus on bringing out that conversation that needs to be had? So, I will, that's all that I have prepared by way of formal presentation, and I'm really excited to see if others have read the book, what you picked up from it. If you haven't, what you heard today that maybe made you curious, resonated with you. What are things that challenged you, or things that you find challenging about some of Brown's ideas and concepts? Excited to have the conversation.